Motorists have been hit hard at the pumps over the past year with double-digit increases. Unfortunately, no respite on the horizon. The Russia-Ukraine conflict could see a further increase of over R2 a litre from next month. For more on this, we're joined by the Fuel Retailers Association CEO, Reggie Sibiya, the Automobile Association's Layton and Alternative Information and Development Centre Director, Dominic Brown. Good evening to all of you, and thank you so much for your time. Let me start on the far end, Layton, with you, and talk about then what you see the impact of this Russia-Ukraine conflict having, particularly on our fuel prices. And the big question here is really whether or not there is anything in government's power to lessen the impact on consumers' pockets.
No, thank you, Kathy. Good to be with you. I mean, the impact is going to be absolutely horrendous. We're looking at an increase based on today's figures of around R2 to petrol and around R3 to diesel, around R2.70 for illuminating paraffin. You calculate that into the cost of fuel, it's bad enough, but when you calculate the cumulative impact that's going to have on food prices and the cost to the economy, the impact is going to be incalculable for millions of South Africans. They are going to feel the pinch. They're already in battle, and this is just going to come as another blow to them. What can government do to mitigate against this? Well, you know, unfortunately, Mr. Sibiya said that when we called for a review of the fuel price, we were fear-mongering. Luckily, the Minister of Finance agreed with our point of view and has said that such a fuel review will happen. We think that's a very important first step. Another step we think that is quite critical is that fuel review actually delivers something very soon. Now, we understand very well that the basic fuel price is not something that can be tinkered with. But we certainly believe that there are components within the fuel price that we can look at to mitigate against rising costs. And that, for us, is where the discussion needs to begin. It's very critical for us that some of the developments that took place in Parliament today with the presentation by the Mineral Resources and Energy Department, that, you know, they clearly are very concerned about the way this is going. And that's a good sign. Are we in favor of all the issues that they've raised to mitigate against these costs? I think it takes a little bit of digesting, but from our point of view, we don't think all of those are workable. We think that looking at the fuel price in total is a good place for us to start.
Mr. Sibiya, let's talk about the lobbying then that has been taking place around, in particular, things like the fuel levy, the contributions to the road accident fund. It's been months that you've been driving this conversation within the national space, but not much progress, at least not to the extent that would have been expected out of the budget speech.
Thanks, Kathy. My view on this issue has always been, we can do reviews. I mean, this country is popular for reviews. I mean, even our AG probably can testify as to how many or how much fees are we paying to consultants, how many consultants are being called on by government, and they do one study after one study, and those studies collect dust. Having said that, we said we must first deal with reality in South Africa. The first reality is that we are a net importer of fuel. Being a net importer, it means there are two things that affect the pump price big time. Firstly is the international oil prices, like we're seeing now with the war between Russia and Ukraine. None of us can influence those prices in South Africa. That is a fact. The second fact is that the biggest contributor to the pump price, second one, is the rand-dollar exchange. That has got to do with our broader economic conditions in South Africa. It's not going to be changed by a price review. And the third component, which is the taxes, which currently make between 30% and 34% of the pump price. Those taxes are determined by the finance minister. They are not reviewed in the petrol or fuel pump price. And Kathy, so that makes 80% of the pump price. And the remaining 20% is the margins in the value chain. And this 20% is not only for retailers. Retailers actually only get 7% gross margin of the total pump price. Compare that with the 34% on taxes. Only 7%. And then the remaining goes to the wholesalers. It goes to the distributors of the product. It goes to the storage facilities. And most of the upcoming players in those spaces now, unfortunately, are black new entrants, which the government is promoting to come and participate in this economy meaningfully. And while they are entering the market, now we are busy looking at reducing the margins. That doesn't talk to SME development. It doesn't talk to the national development plan of this country. In fact, it doesn't even talk to the jobs creation. Because the next thing that's going to happen when we start revising this 20% contribution to the price, which is the margins mainly for SMMEs who are new entrants in the market, we're also going to experience a huge, losses on jobs. And my question is, what, solution are we really bringing in terms of reviewing these prices down? We are not resolving the root cause. And, Kathy, as I'm sitting here, I'm in Germany. I've been here for 2 weeks now. It's a deregulated market. In this market in Germany, 52% of the pump price is made of taxes, government taxes. And that is why currently in most countries, the biggest outcry from motorists is that the governments of those countries should look at eliminating completely taxes outside of the fuel price. These are the countries who are net importers like South Africa, because they understand that, you can't do anything about the international prices.
Dominic,
you can't do anything about the other elements of the pump price.
Dominic, let me bring you in here, because if we listen to what the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, was saying just in the last 2 weeks, urging South Africans to brace themselves for what lies ahead. The posture was very much one of a government that sees itself as being caught up in the storm with the rest of the world and not really having much at its disposal to help cushion the impact, because, we seem to be caught up in this inevitable set of circumstances. Do you think that is truly the case?
No, and I do agree to an extent with the previous two speakers that we should review the total petrol price. I have a slightly different percentage to the previous speaker. If you take the fuel levy, which is R3.93, plus the retirement annuity fund, which is R2.18, comes to R6.11. So that is just under 30% of the total fuel price. And there is definitely space to reduce that fuel levy or eliminate it, but then we must consider the revenue implications that it would have for the budget. So the fuel levy and the retirement annuity fund together collectively collects 90 billion rand in revenue, 90. And the fuel levy itself, which if you remove, is just over 60% of it, which equates to about 57 billion rand. So the question is, where do you raise that money from? And I think this is where maybe the previous two speakers and I would disagree. I think For example, the percentage point decrease in corporate income tax should be rolled back. This in itself could bring in between 8 to 10 billion rand in revenue. And there's no evidence historically that the reduction in corporate income tax rates increases investment. Not to mention that the effective corporate income tax rates, what corporations are actually paying in taxes, is about half the 28 or 27%, as it will be from the 1st of April, at about 11 to 15%. So corporations can pay a lot more taxes, and we should strengthen regulations to ensure that corporations pay their fair share. There's also been tax bracket creep and adjustments in inflation for personal income tax, as well as for medical aid and pension schemes. This largely advantages people with incomes of more than 500,000 rand to more than 1.5 million rand per annum, at the expense of the majority of the population, more than 30 billion of which are living on below 1,335 rand per month. So what we should be doing is ensuring that we, first of all, claw back the rollback in bracket creep. That will raise 13.2 billion rand over the coming year. But if you roll it back to tax the rich at the same level of lifestyles as they were in 2005, you could actually raise more than 100 billion rand each year, which could be redirected to one, investment in the real economy, where jobs can be created.
Sure.
For example, sorry?
Yes, you can continue. Just wrap up for me soon, Dominic, if possible.
So there's a lot of things that government can do, and besides looking at the fuel levy itself and looking at raising taxes on the rich, we should also be thinking through how we transform the economy to ensure that it meets the needs of the people and the planet. So here we need to invest in housing, in transport, in education and healthcare, everything that government has cut its budget on over the past 3 years and will continue to cut, with the biggest cuts coming next year.
Layton, let me wrap up with you. You know, all of these suggestions that have been put on the table would require some planning from government. And as you heard from Reggie, there always is the initial step of wanting to do research before implementing anything. The kind of prices that we're likely to see are going to be hitting consumers soon. So these are not prices far down the line. What does that mean for people who are sitting in their homes right now and thinking, well, what can I expect going into the short to medium term?
Yeah, I think Mr. Sibiya is absolutely correct that a review, cannot gather dust and it can't take too long to get to fruition. In terms of the one of the first steps that we think needs to be taken is in terms of the Road Accident Fund, which is an institution that is being poorly managed and being run into the ground. So the Road Accident Fund levy, in our view, needs a wholesale review. That is one tax that we think can be reviewed. The general fuel levy, which on its own contributes around 90 billion rand to the fiscus, is not one of those taxes government is going to want to get rid of, because it's a steady and easy income for government. We have to look, and I think the point that Dominic and both Reggie made was how are we allocating these funds? And people are sitting at home going, well, how do we deal with this? Well, we've got to put pressure on government to allocate these funds a little bit more assiduously than what they are currently doing. And one example, obviously, and it's a very good example, is that the country at the moment is spending 2 billion rand per annum on the Gautrain up in Gauteng to compensate a private company for low ridership levels on a system that is geared specifically for the elite. That, in our view, is completely anachronistic in terms of its application. There's money there that government should be allocating much better towards public transport. So that's just one example. We have to start looking at how we are utilizing the funds we collect through tax better, and we have to look not at the price of fuel, but at the pricing model of fuel. And I think that's where the AA has said the review needs to begin in it.
All right, let's leave it there for tonight. And of course, we had Reggie Sibiya, CEO of the Fuel Retailers Association, Layton, he's with the Automobile Association, and Dominic Brown, he is Director of the Alternative Information and Development Center.